Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
What was with the hand?
I was sending
People
it, Tom.
listening to this afterwards won't know what I'm talking about at least, but like, you did like this, like, you know, when it's like, all right, we're recording in 3, 2, and then it was like you were doing like a Spider-Man kind of thing of just like, hey, hand towards the camera.
Yeah, it's you got to G yourself up, Tom. That's high performers need to get themselves in this. I'm basically like MJ, okay, just like getting myself in the zone before a big match. Michael Jordan, you were
talking about, because we were, I just referenced Spider-Man, so I was trying to piece like,
I'm like Mary Jane
Watson fit into this. I was like, does Mary Jane big herself up before? I want to say
before getting saved by Spider-Man.
Actress? Yeah. Is that what she does?
Sure.
In the movies, I think she does. I don't know.
Yeah, that was Kirsten Dunst's
No, that's a lie.
thing.
I think I watched them in lockdown.
She was a sad waitress turned actress. That's definitely the trajectory of every
movies. Although I thought in others she's a journalist.
I like the journalist MJ better. Like
I think in the video game.
In the video game, she's a journalist. Yeah. I think I like that. I like that for her a bit better. Actress is a little bit shallow. I say that having both of us having trained as actors. So.
Oh yeah. Naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this is Spider-Man Watch. Natural Selection.
Spidey Watch. Spidey Sense with Tom and George, and we basically just talk about characters from Spider-Man extended cinematic universes and compare them against the novel, against the graphic novels.
Yeah, we just keep tabs on specifically what Mary Jane is up to at any given period of her life. It's been a long 10 years of the same old, really, in the MJ space.
Yeah, and nearly 500 episodes, which is astounding and also terrifying.
We shouldn't be allowed to have made this many of these. Whoever's in charge of like allowing us to do what we do, like whatever government body has dropped the ball. Someone's
getting fired.
Yeah.
That's the good thing about podcasting is no one can fire you. No one can make you quit. And that's why we've done 10 years worth of these.
That's very true.
The good and bad thing, I suppose, depending on your perspective.
Yes.
But
so, for realsies, we're a newsy type stuff and things podcast.
I mean, I'm flexible on that. I'm not married to it 10 years in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's fair. We were going to become just nothing but us talking about movies if Trump won the election. But no, thanks, Joe Biden. You've kept us in the game.
I'm happy now that we can make jokes about old man Biden. Like I know beforehand, you don't want to make fun of the guy because he's running against Trump, and like we don't want a single person thinking that their vote doesn't matter and not voting against Trump by voting for Biden. But now that it's all said and done, I'm happy to make fun of Joe Biden. He seems
he's a million.
He's a million years old. He's old as the hills. Yeah. You know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of like like in God of War where they're talking about like one of the ancients, like one of these gods that have been here for like 900 years and fought the world serpent or something like that. That's how I think of Joe Biden. He's just been here since the beginning of creation.
Yeah, he's just somehow always been there, even at like the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Like somehow he was there,
sniffing,
and still 87 or whatever age he is,
sniffing Hamilton's hair. So on Joe Biden, I suppose we can start with that first story there. Joe Biden is still the president-elect and is going to be the next United States president. He keeps winning this election over and over again. Have you noticed every step, they're like, okay, there's this, then votes need to be certified, and then it goes to the electoral college, and then this, and then that, which was your idea to cover that early on, actually, which was quite good because it gave me a good... That's part of the process, I guess, I wasn't really aware about that much beforehand. Like, I was aware conceptually of the electoral college, but I didn't know about all the certification processes and things.
Oh, yeah. And normally none, like, we're not Americans, but, like, particularly probably Americans, like, they don't need to think about it either in most election years, because in most election years, the votes start coming through. Someone's like, well, I've clearly lost. I concede.
Yeah.
And then it's done. And there's not months and months and months of, like, hack lawyers dragging like mimosa-fueled witnesses in front of like grand juries to try and overturn the election, and no one has to go into the nitty-gritty of who meets when, who votes on what, who then listens to what they voted on to be like, cool, they voted on it, but now we've got to move it to another location where these people have to say, yep, they sure did vote on it, and then they send it to other people who go, yep, that vote sure did happen, they voted this many times, and they voted for this person. It's been 3 fucking months, but yes, they won.
So it just seems like Joe Biden, just at each step of the process, people like, he won. He definitely won this election. He's still winning. He's in a pretty solid chance of definitely having won this election 2 months ago.
Oh, you want a recount? 1 for Biden,
2 for Biden.
Should we do another recount?
But yeah, so the last step of the process before the actual inauguration, which is on the 20th of Jan, I believe.
20th US time, so the 21st our time or something like that. But yeah, around then.
So this last step of the process is the sort of certification that goes through the House and the Senate. But unsurprisingly,
that happens on Wednesday, I think.
Yeah, so is the 6th of Jan. We're currently coming to you recording on the 3rd of Jan, Australian time. So a bunch of senators, thankfully not a lot of senators, but like more than none, are coming together to say that they are going to refuse to certify Joe Biden's election victory unless a commission is set up to investigate alleged voter fraud. Keep in mind, the Electoral College has voted, like all of the states have certified their results. It is a literally meaningless gesture that could not possibly hope to do anything at this point.
And also, fucking, they've been investigating your voter fraud. They've been doing that, and they keep coming up donuts. They keep going up. No, there's been no election fraud.
Yeah,
you can check again.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you almost don't want to sort of like report on this story too much because there's not that much like there. It's just like Republicans are still batshit insane and
still desperate.
And they still lost the election. Like, it doesn't matter how much they pitch a fit, they're still not going to have won it. But the cabal of crazy senators is led by Ted Cruz. 11 senators and senators-elect want a 10-day delay to audit the unsubstantiated allegations. It doesn't really matter because the Democrats control the House, and Mitch McConnell even has congratulated Biden on his victory and said, like, no, we're going to vote to certify the results and everything's going to go through as normal. So it's literally just posturing at this stage. These sort of like Tea Party hyper-conservative Republicans can turn around to their base and say, see, I did what you wanted me to do. I tried to stop the election fraud. Please don't vote me out.
We never gave up.
We never gave in.
Yeah.
Imagine being Ted Cruz, though. Like, he went after Trump hard during the primary. And like Trump accused his dad of being complicit in the JFK assassination. Do you remember that?
Right. Yeah. I thought there was something about Ted Cruz's dad killing JFK or something. I was like, what?
And like, imagine after all the horrible shit that Trump has tweeted about you and put you through, for you to still be such a spineless fucking amoeba to go along with this horse shit just to satisfy your base. Like, imagine what a piece of shit you must have to be to do something like that.
Well, it's the same with who's the other one?
Lindsey Graham.
Graham, yeah, Lindsey Graham. Like, just all the like the clips that they have of him, like just like smashing Trump with just awful things. Like, just saying, like, what a piece of shit
and true things, by the way, awful things, accurate awful things about Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, it wasn't just him saying like bullshit just to score political points. Like, he was making valid, like, he's a nightmare kind of person, and now he's all up his butt. Like, just woo, love me that Trump. It's the thing we were saying earlier this year after the Democratic primaries. Once they pick a candidate, now suddenly all the other candidates who've been calling that candidate a piece of shit the whole time because they wanted to be the candidate now have to be like, yeah, Joe Biden, He's great. He's
Can't-
so great. Love him.
Can't wait
I
to
know
be
I
a
called him-
Secretary of Transportation.
Yeah.
That's what I always
Yeah.
dreamed of. I always
Yeah.
grew up dreaming about trades. Did you see that,
that was,
Pete Buttigieg clip
Buttigieg?
where
Yeah.
he talked about proposing to his husband at an airport? I was like, what fucking sociopath proposes? What the fuck, Pete? What, like, okay, planes are great. I love trains. Like, automobiles are pretty good. I'm not rocking a hard on for a fucking airport, you weirdo. Who are these people? They're fucking lizard people, honestly. To just go from being like, Joe Biden's an old, infirm piece of shit. I fucking hate him. He's a troll. Like, he's a piece of crap and he can't possibly. And it should be like, hey, we'll serve with dignity and honor in the Biden administration. Like, who are these people, honestly?
It's like, Earth belongs to the young. And he linked it in there like, I love old people.
Maybe he's really hoping for like a Battlestar Galactica situation where all of the government dies and he's like the one cabinet secretary that's left, and so he becomes the president by default sort of situation.
So like a cross between like Star Trek and Designated Survivor.
No, Designated Survivor and Battlestar Galactica have the exact same plot, except one happens in space. So
Even better.
Battlestar Galactica is obviously the superior of the two shows as a result.
Oh, yeah, everything
is better in
everything
space.
is better if it's in space.
Yeah, we've covered this. We know any keen listeners of the show would know everything's better when it happens in space.
Yeah.
So the legal efforts to overturn the results, as we mentioned, have been overwhelmingly rejected by the courts. I think it's like 1 for 80 or something like that. It's just a small number of postal ballots in Pennsylvania, which got like disqualified on a technicality. But again, not enough to do fucking diddly shit about affecting the result at all. So it's like, it's done. It's been done since like November 10th. It's been done.
Yeah.
And
they just can't accept defeat. Like, this is when you accept defeat and you prep the next fight. Like, is normally what you do in these situations, right? If you've lost, like, you know, the old adage, like, we've lost the battle, we haven't lost the war. That kind of thing, right?
It's
not me encouraging the Republicans, fuck off into the sun, but like that's supposed to respond to this sort of shit.
It really is the sort of situation where you just need to man up and accept that you lost. And you know, like after I think it was the 2012 election loss against Obama. Was it 2012? No, it would have been 2012.
Was that like Romney and
Obama? Yeah. They, the Republicans, after they lost the election, they did a postmortem. They, figured out these are what we're going to have to do to drag the Republican Party into the 21st century. Like, you suck it up, you gather your shit, and you try and register more voters and communicate your message. And like, I don't want to explain to them how democracy works because they might try and do it, but like, it just. That's you sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. It's like basic sportsmanship. It's the shit that like, this is why we make 8-year-olds play soccer and things like that and do team sports. It's like, not so that they all become professional athletes and live out daddy's fantasy or anything like that, but like, so you can understand winning and losing and like trying an effort and like you can be gracious in defeat. Like, this is the whole point. And Republicans are just like, how about we just live in a reality where we didn't lose instead?
Feel happier there.
It feels much nicer. It's got a certain truthiness about it. It's not true, but it feels true. And that's the most important thing.
It's always the most important thing.
So I look forward to Joe Biden still winning the presidential election, even after he's sworn into office, winning it all the way into the midterms and maybe into his second term. I think after he wins his second term, it'll be pretty obvious that he's definitely won this election. Yeah. That's my thought.
We can only hope.
So that's America.
That's been America, I guess, lately. I mean, COVID's still a huge issue over there. Been a serious big howdy-do. I actually saw something going on today, like it's a bit out of left field, this story, but like a whole bunch of like, influencers and content creator, like, YouTube, TikTok sort of sensation kind of people just had a massive rager in California or something like that.
What's this?
Ooh, pardon me. Like, just, had this massive party that's like footage all over the internet, and it's like all clusters of people and all these arrogant fuckheads not having masks and doing all the shit you're not supposed to do.
This has been happening
when you haven't got your shit together over there.
This is I remember it being talked about on Joe Rogan some months ago, where this was like a recurring issue where these TikTok like young influencer people kept having parties, and I think it was like, I don't know if it was Logan Paul or it was like a Logan Paul type person.
Yeah.
In his, just like some entitled like TikTok non-celebrity shithead kept having parties, and they ended up switching off the water and power. And Joe Rogan was very upset about the fact that they switched off the water and power. But I was like, nah, good on him. Fuck him. If you keep throwing rages and like we keep fining you and the fine is like 10 grand or whatever, but it doesn't matter because you're literally a fucking multi-millionaire and you can afford to pay 10 grand a pop for each one of these parties. Like, something else needs to be done. Fuck it. Turn off the water. Good luck having a slip and slide without the water.
Yeah, we tried asking nicely and then here we go.
I'm totally fine with this.
So that's pretty wild. But also, the Rona is rearing its head again here back home in like a much smaller scale than previously, but still concerning in a way.
So, there's been sort of dozens of cases over the last week or so per day over in New South Wales. And even a couple of cases here in Melbourne, which I understand are from that New South Wales.
Yeah, they genome sequenced it back, so they know it definitely came from New South Wales somehow. I don't think they've pinpointed precisely how it got in, like to the person, but they know that the two things are connected.
And it seems like the Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, has finally deigned to move a few inches and do something about it, because she's come up with she's dipping her toes into the pool, as you said earlier, Tom. She's not doing enough to be like actually efficacious, but she wants to be like a true politician. She wants to be seen to be doing something, even if that something really doesn't make that much of a difference in the long run.
Because when it's like we've all been talking about, hey, maybe mandate masks, and everyone's like, oh, I really don't want to mandate masks because I saw how that went in Melbourne, and like, maybe mandate masks. And she's like, all right. Masks are required indoors in certain settings. It's like, come on. There's like, and the fine is $200. It's like, come on.
And the fine is a literal slap on the wrist.
The fine is a good talking to, and then you can be on your way.
A spanking. They've announced some new restrictions, but they've lifted lockdown orders in the southern half of Sydney's northern beaches. So that's where the original sort of outbreak sort of was, and then sort of started spreading out to wider Sydney. But like the thing that blew my mind is up until these restrictions were announced, they've had almost nothing. Like that suburb, or that area of the northern beaches was locked down pretty hard. Then the rest of Sydney was basically normal. And that's
free for all. Yeah.
And that's what's been blowing me away. Like, especially over the last 6 months, where Melbourne's basically been in some form of lockdown pretty consistently up until a couple of weeks ago, really. To see influencers in Sydney and, in Queensland, like all hanging out with each other, like, arms all over each other, just like living in a completely different world to the rest of us down here in Melbourne. And like, I couldn't visit my parents until like 4 weeks ago, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like this different universe that New South Wales has been living in. And you think Gladys Berejiklian would make, I don't know, given that there started being an outbreak of cases, that you would go, okay, well, the freedoms that we've got here in New South Wales are really super precious, and we've been super lucky up until this point that we haven't had a massive outbreak. Like, surely when things happen, you'd think you'd want to jump on it right away and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to mandate masks. Mandating mask wearing, like, is such an easy thing to do, because it's like, it's like cost effective. It's like minimal intrusions on people's safety, and it's like makes a massive difference. As we've seen in like between counties in America, the counties that do mandate mask wearing versus those who don't, and like in similar areas, and you could see the difference in the numbers. Like, it's such a small minor thing that would make such a huge difference. And even that on that, she's like, okay, fine, masks, but only inside, and only if you're standing on your left foot, and only, you know, if you're around 15 people, and only if you're speaking Portuguese. Like, what? Just do it. Just do the thing. Either do the thing or don't do the thing, Gladys. You know how you remember when your corrupt boyfriend was talking to you about all the corrupt things that he was doing, and you chose not to hear what he was saying? You made a decision in that moment, and it was a firm decision. Make a similarly firm decision now on mask wearing.
Yeah, no, it's exactly the kind of thing to do. Because, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned as well, like, sort of like the different worlds living in and stuff like that. Because I first got to see my parents in person for the first time in about a year last week for Christmas.
Because they're up in the ACT.
Yeah, they're up in the ACT. And it really felt like a whole other world sort of being there. Because, like, I know we've been sort of a bit more open in Victoria now for the past few weeks, as you said. But, you know, we're still required to have masks on us in case you're about to enter in a scenario like going into a shop or stuff like that, to have them on. Canberra, nothing like that. So it was really weird to kind of be like, this is just, it's just kind of normal again.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you QR code sign into places just for contact tracing purposes and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it felt really weird just for sort of stuff to be normal again, which was, it was just really, really strange. But yeah, and so it not renewed, but reinforced just the thing of like how precious normality actually is. So, like to get back to it in some form or other. So yeah, hopefully the outbreak that we're seeing at the moment is fairly well contained if people can get their shit together. Because I mean, I don't know. What do you feel about whether or not we'd be heading for another kind of lockdown period like we had?
I'd be really reluctant to do another lockdown. I feel like Melbourne in particular has had it pretty tough. Like, and that's why Victoria shut its borders to New South Wales pretty quickly. And Gladys was like, oh, come on, why you got to do that? It's like, well, I don't see, do you understand the contradiction, Gladys, of you saying that? Because you did that to us. So it kind of feels like maybe you would be a little bit more understanding of how this, no empathy whatsoever. Cool. Classic LOP.
None of that.
I don't know. It really bothers me that, you know, where are the 100 headlines in a row about from the Herald Sun or from the whatever, the Courier Mail or whatever they have up there.
Daily Telegraph,
you know, the 100 headlines in a row calling her, you know, dictator Gladdy for making us wear masks, and, you know, all this sort of like, I'm not seeing any of that kind of coverage. Like Scott Morrison's like, she did what she had to do, she had to get in there and, you know, do the restrictions. And I was like, it's weird that there wasn't a similar level of empathy extended to Dan Andrews in Victoria when we got from 700 cases a day to 0 because of these tough lockdown measures, which everyone was criticizing at every turn. Meanwhile, Gladys is letting an epidemic spiral out of control right under her nose, and everyone's like, oh, you know, she's doing the best she can. Oh, Gladys, you know, she's doing the best she can.
Like it's almost like there's a partisan difference.
Almost like it's this weird
dates or something.
Double standard. I mean, what could be the difference between Gladys, who's in the conservative side of politics, in the LNP, Liberal and National Party, versus Dan Andrews, who's in Labor on Victoria? I can't think of any particular ideological difference. No, I think they're both getting equal treatment. I think you're right, Tom.
Oh yeah, definitely. What Gladys needs is an awesome DJ mix about beer drinking, and then they're exactly the same. So yeah, and maybe clearly that's the difference.
Maybe like a rogue member of the Labor Party could make little kill cards and put them on playing cards of all the different ministers. They'd respond obviously fine to that. Tim Smith did that here, obviously, to Dan Andrews, and, you know, just, you know, threatening violence against state members of parliament. I think that's just like normal.
Why not?
Obviously,
tis the season.
Tis the season. Exactly right. No, obviously don't do that. That was satirical. It lays bare really like the absolute grotesque double standard that we have in our media for LNP politicians versus Labor politicians. The media is clearly on one side in regards to this, and it's just, I don't know, it's just gross. You could risk a second wave, and not just that, a second wave which like permeates to other areas of the country. Like Melbourne's already done it really tough. We cannot have a third wave, and they need to get on top of their shit.
Yeah, and definitely. And since they've already genome sequenced it to be connected to New South Wales, like we can't talk about it as though
it's an academic.
Like, these cases will pop up because we only are aware of clusters when tests happen, and if someone's not tested but they have it somehow, we just don't know about it. And these things can pop up. It's like, no, this was a direct result. We can draw that line. You can connect those dots, and yeah, so this is a big deal, and that's why what happens there affects here and affects everywhere else, particularly if you can't get the contact tracing right, because who knows where people fucking end up before they close stuff off, right?
Contact tracing will work if it's like half a dozen cases a day. It'll work, but the problem is that it can really quickly spiral out of control.
And you can see so many people.
Yeah. And there's if the virus is airborne, and you're in a room in a restaurant with a bunch of other people, you could have exposed a shitload of people. They all go off and do their own things in their own areas, and that one cluster becomes very quickly becomes another wave. Like, that's how exponential numbers work. They increase really quickly. And we still, even a year into this pandemic, even with a vaccine on its way, even with all of those things, we still don't really have an appreciation for how quickly things can spiral out of control. Like, within the space of a couple of days, here in Melbourne, we were restricted from 30 people in the home to 15. Border.
Did that like that.
People got stuck in other states. There was the story I saw this morning on the ABC where they were talking about a family who was off camping somewhere in New South Wales, like out of mobile phone reception.
Oh, no.
And they were like camping for 4 days, and they come back and they're like, yeah, the border's closed. Sorry, you can't come home. You just got to fucking hang out in New South Wales, I guess.
Like, good thing you have all this camping equipment.
Yeah, because you will be homeless for several weeks.
The thing I found interesting is the situations like, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours the other day who works in mining or like, in like geological sort of stuff. And so, obviously they require a lot of travel out to Perth or like out to WA from this side of the country. And that the WA Premier changed the border rules while they were in the air. Like, it's
come on.
4-hour trip. Right?
Surely that doesn't count.
In 4 hours. So as soon as they landed, to hotel quarantine.
Come on.
Straight away.
Come on.
And I thought, wouldn't the options... I don't know why they don't offer this. So maybe, I don't know if you have an idea. But surely it would be, particularly in an instance like that, right? Where it's changed in the air. So you can't have made this decision when you left.
In all fairness, like someone farts and Western Australia closes their borders. You know what I mean? Like,
That's true. They are very much like fingers on the pulse, being like, nah, cut it now. But
you're looking kind of sweaty. We're going to close our borders.
Yeah. Why isn't it an option when you arrive? If they're like, you have like, okay, so you're here. If you are coming into WA or wherever, you got to quarantine for 14 days, or you turn around and you go straight back. If they can consider the airport, like, if they never leave the airport, it's like, nah, get on a plane and go. It's like how they turn people away at the border. Why can't we turn plane arrivals away at the border as well? But I don't know. I suppose there's probably a logistical nightmare for that, like getting them on flights back. If you can't get them on a flight relatively immediately, where are they supposed to sleep? Do they just sleep in the airport lounge? Like, all that kind of crap.
If you're hanging out in the airport lounge around other people, kind of defeats the point of...
I just thought, like, can't they consider, like, the airport a quarantine zone sort of in a similar kind of way? So as rather than... Because this friend of a friend that was talking about before, they were only meant to be in WA for, like, 4 days. So they get there, they'll quarantine for 2 weeks, and then they leave.
Right.
Like, they could just come back. So instead of spending 14 days... in quarantine, couldn't they have just been told to go home, like, straight away? As long as you don't leave anywhere.
Look,
I guess.
I don't think a lot of these rules are made for all of these different use cases. It's just a case of, like, we just need, like, a rule of thumb that sort of suits everything. I saw and the problem is a lot of these rules are quite complex. I saw a story the day before, about a couple who was, like... I can't remember which airport they arrived at, but I think they arrived in New South Wales, or they were coming from New South Wales to Victoria, something like that.
Oh, is this people from Canberra to Victoria?
It might have been. So where the rules had changed, and they understood that they couldn't. So similar sort of thing where the rules had changed in the air, and then they couldn't ascertain. This is their side of the story, whether or not they needed to quarantine from the officers that were on the ground. They were like, "What's the situation? Do we need to quarantine? It was fine before. Now we're not so sure." Yeah. And apparently they couldn't get an answer from these officers, and so after a couple of hours, they just left them alone. They're just like, well, we're not going to fucking sit and wait around here for hours. So they just left. Yeah. And then the police described it as like them absconding and like running away, and they're each being fined $10,000 now as a result. And like, no, we definitely said you guys had to quarantine and you guys ran from the police, and they caught up with them in New South Wales. Somewhere.
Oh, so yeah, these are the people
in
they found in Goulburn?
Goulburn, yeah, that's it. And so it's like, I believe the couple in that side of the story. I very much doubt that like some guy on the ground was like absolutely adamant with them, and then they just like ran from the police knowing that they'd obviously be tracked down. Like they would have to be the dumbest fucking people in history to try that on. I definitely believe the story of like government incompetence and people not knowing what to do, and then they just kind of left because they were unattended, and then what I mean? Like I believe that story. That seems pretty legit. As opposed to the government's version of events where they're like, it's Bonnie and Clyde on the run, looking to infect people with COVID and then go for a day trip and then go back. Like, I don't know. That doesn't sound legit. I definitely
at least believe that there's got to be some, like, because of how complicated these sorts of things are getting with like, oh, well, if you've been in New South Wales, if you're returning after December 11th, but it's before midnight on December 30th, you don't have to quarantine, but monitor for symptoms. But if it's after midnight, you quarantine for 14 days. And you're like, okay, but... so it's like, it's 12:01. So,
honestly, I would just advise...
I have to quarantine?
I would just advise against doing any interstate travel. Like, it just seems... When Gracie and I were looking at doing our honeymoon, we were like... we were thinking we'd love to go to the Barossa Valley or something in South Australia, or maybe we could go up to Jarvis Bay or something in New South Wales. But it's like... We've seen how quickly things can turn around in 2 days. All of a sudden there's restrictions and quarantine. I was like, I don't want to get stuck in, or cut our honeymoon short or something. It's only like 4 days to begin with. Like, I just like, if you're in Victoria at least and you're from Victoria, then, no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to get home. But like people are planning trips and this sort of shit. Like people I know, I'm like, I would not plan any fucking trips interstate right now. It seems too volatile because as we see, things can change just like that. And then you're stuck.
Oh, yeah.
Or you got to quarantine for 14 days when you come home in hotel quarantine. You got to do that out of pocket. Like it just seems fucking miserable. Like,
yeah, that's what we were monitoring when we were in the ACT. It was like, we knew we had to have permits to come back in, but it's like, okay, if they institute anything that's like, hey, we're closing the border, you have until X amount of time, we would have just gone.
Just picked up and left.
Straight away. Just picked up and left. Like, I don't care what time of day it was. It's like, if we have to fucking cross it then, we cross it then.
So
thankfully, we were fine.
With going to Canberra, did you guys were you driving or did you take flights?
We drove. We didn't take flights because I just sort of thought, like, yeah, it's longer because it adds like 2 days worth of driving each end of your trip, a day each end. Sorry, but I just thought even with our low case numbers, just an airport is like probably not where you want to be going because people are coming from everywhere, and it not only might expose yourself to it, but it's more like it's not so much I'm super worried about my health. It's more like I just don't want to pick something up and take it somewhere else and fuck up another state's lockdown.
Yeah, right? I like the idea of having my own car, right? Of like being in my own little bubble, and then I'm not interacting with people. I'm not running into people. Like the closest
minimizing stops.
Yeah, you just you fill up with petrol every so often, and that's really the only exposure that you'd have to other people.
Yeah,
so that makes more sense to me. But
yeah, so that's how we did it. And crossing the border was super easy. We had our permits and they stopped us in threes and we're like, here are our permits, here are our IDs that they match what's on the thing. And they were like, rad, on you go.
Yeah. So you actually had to like fill stuff out beforehand applying for
Yeah, we had to go on our website and fill in this is where we're leaving from in Canberra, this is where we're going in Victoria, this is the date that we're going, and we had to like do essentially a digital acceptance of the terms and conditions, which included a declaration that we hadn't been to a New South Wales red zone and all this sort of stuff. Didn't have to say where we'd been though.
Mm.
Like, that's what I thought was interesting. It was just me saying, have not been to Sydney, rather than making me list where I'd been, so that if I was a problem, they'd know.
I have, however, been dining on bats in Wuhan. I don't know if that's a problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, and I want to tell people. It was amazing.
I want them to know.
Why are you looking at me like that?
So, yeah, look.
So that's the COVID story.
Praying for not a third wave here in Victoria or a second wave in New South Wales. I would just like to enjoy living life for the next couple of months until the vaccine becomes properly sort of proliferated.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that again.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Like, it's 2021 now. We've fixed the virus, yeah?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. As of 12:01 on Jan 1st. Like,
see you 2020. Bye, bitch. 2020, you suck balls. 2021, going to be so much better. And meanwhile, lockdown 3.0 is tapping a baseball bat into its palm.
Yeah, it's on our doorstep.
That's Sir Paddling. So, we were speaking of the US elections a little bit earlier. And as we all know, Hugo Chavez, the deceased dictator of Venezuela, I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
Stole the election for Joe Biden. We all know that. That's a fact. That's a science fact.
Yeah, they totally interfered in the election somehow
with the machines. It was long dead, and the voting machines, etc. I don't need to explain myself to you, Tom. You know the.
Yeah, of course I do.
The story.
I've seen Rudy Giuliani's testimony. It's bulletproof.
Bulletproof, much like that hairpiece of his. So Venezuela, obviously, they're not doing. This is the longest segue ever. So Venezuelans have taken to looking at like Bitcoin and digital currency as a way of gaining money recently. As we have discussed on the show before, they have an issue with their currency, issues with hyperinflation. Basically, their currency is more or less worthless. And so they've been finding new and interesting and innovative ways to not starve to death. So one of those ways is basically by sort of mining digital currency, and by playing massive MMORPGs, what are they called? Massive multiplayer online role-playing games.
Role-playing games, yep.
In order to sort of create currency that they can then sell, because their currency is so cooked that even this like modicum of money that they could make playing RuneScape or whatever, and producing mass murdering dragons and mass producing runes, as this article says. At current exchange rates, 1 M coins are worth about 50 cents. A gold farmer can earn $40 a month, a tidy sum in a country where the minimum wage is worth about $7.50 a month. Some farmers trade the coins for Bitcoin, which, though more volatile than most conventional currencies, is more stable than Venezuela's bolivar. And as we know, Bitcoin recently surged past $30,000 US for
which
the
is
first
higher
time
than
this
it
week.
was when it was like, so it's like higher than it was when it was all the rage at like, Christmas lunch discussions with people who have had no interest in tech a few years ago, being like, so what's this Bitcoin I've been hearing so much about?
Yeah, when you saw all those news stories about the Bitcoin millionaires, it was worth less than what it is now. And it's interesting, actually. It's been kind of like a quiet story over the last 6 months. Bitcoin, after that big peak in 2017, 2018, whenever it was really down in the doldrums for quite a while, was not doing well. And sort of everyone was like, this is it. Bitcoin's busted. It's absolutely like, this is proven that it can't hold real value like a real currency. It's just no way it's going to get off the ground. And I guess because of all the uncertainty in the pandemic, and there's also been announcements that PayPal, I think it was going to allow you to trade in cryptocurrency, and like official platforms like Facebook's Libra currency. It was like a cryptocurrency in development. I don't know exactly what the state of that is at the moment, but like all of these legit places are now saying, okay, we're going to incorporate cryptocurrencies into our thing finally. And then that's meant that people have seen it as a legit store of value. Like, okay, well, if PayPal or whoever it is are going to accept this into the future, like, it looks like this is going to be a real thing. Like, it's not just a fad or like a niche thing anymore. Like, it's going to be a proper widespread thing at some point. So I think a lot of people have just thrown money into it as like a, who knows what's happening with coronavirus, what's going to happen with the economy. Let's just throw our money into Bitcoin and hopefully that'll get a better return for us. And for those people who have done that at the right time, that is the case. Full disclosure, I have a very small fragment of Bitcoin, which has increased in value somewhat. So take that however you will, full disclosure. But I always kind of figured like it's going to be some version of Bitcoin or digital currency is going to be the thing eventually, whether it's Bitcoin or Litecoin or Ethereum or
Dogecoin.
Yeah, well, Dogecoin. Yeah, exactly right. It seems like digital currency is going to be the thing in the future, especially for these people in Venezuela. You got to think like, okay, yes, it is volatile. Yes, it is this weird experimental thing, but like, why would I put money into our currency when we know our currency is crap and it's not working out for us? Like, why not put it into something that's sort of international and like is a store of value that I can keep and it's separate from all the dumb economic shit that's happening inside our country? Like, I definitely get that as an impulse. Like, you just hope the currency doesn't crash and become totally worthless for them. You know, like, you want it to work out for them because these are people's like livelihoods and this is the way that they're getting food now. Like, it's not just a matter of like, you know, some guy in, you know, Puerto Rico who's trying to get around US taxes, like, you know, some tech, you know, idiot that's trying to be a millionaire off crypto trading. Like, this, you know, this is the economy at this scale becomes like people's lives and their ability to feed themselves. So you really don't hope it doesn't fucking self-combust, but
no, definitely not. And I find the gaming angle of this is really interesting.
Yeah, how so?
Because well, I guess because normally when we talk about like real money, but trading in terms
all
of
money's
games,
fiction, man. It's all fiction. None of it's real. Ever since we got off the gold standard in the 70s, bro, that's when the whole fucking thing went to shit, mate. Okay? That's the whole fucking thing. It's made up, bro.
All words are made up.
What are words but fucking sounds to convey meaning, bro? From my brain to yours. Mate. Everything's fucking made up. I just took mushrooms like 45 minutes ago, and I don't think they're fucking kicked in yet. But let me tell you what I think about words, okay?
But yeah, like whenever we talk about gaming and like real money trading, you know, we're looking at microtransactions where we're doing like predatory, like kind of gambling-y sort of mechanics and stuff like that. And then, but this is interesting in the sense of like, I don't play a lot of RuneScape, but the angle that I sort of got from this is that it's not like people like, you know, this isn't the same thing as like the game developers just putting in the ability, pardon me, to purchase gold on top of earning it in the game. You're able to, separate from the game's economy, sell your gold to players, and players are willing to purchase them, and that's how these people are making their money.
Yeah, so you're playing the game to earn in-game items that are then sold online to other players for money, which is like, it's this weird, like, oddly sort of like global aspect to this sort of like niche regional economic issue. It's like, because Venezuela's currency keeps being more and more devalued over time, to be able to earn money in US dollars and trade in US dollars or Bitcoin or whatever, all of a sudden becomes a really valuable proposition. It's like the sub-currency, like a shadow currency almost, that underlies, like, even if your country's economy is going to absolute shit, you can sort of do this financial thing outside of the system, which if you're earning 4 times the minimum wage or 5 times the minimum wage in a country where there's a real economic crisis, like playing video games, like that's amazing. Like,
yeah.
And it's like,
that's what I mean. It's genius.
Completely unforeseen thing of like a global economy, a global game with global currency. And like, it's created this whole like sub financial system And it's just a game. Like, I don't think the founders of the game had any sort of inkling that that's where any of this would head at some point.
And that's my point. It's like, because normally when you hear about real money trading, it's either, microtransactions just for like
I want to buy a skin, or I want to buy whatever cosmetics for my character, or
in RuneScape's menu, be like, oh, we can just buy 1 million coins for 50 cents. You're like, okay, great. But or in a gambling sense, because there are games like Counter-Strike, which have like these economies where you can trade in skins for your weapons and stuff, and people like put a value on them based on their rarity and their look and all that sort of stuff. And there are third-party websites where people gamble on these things or bid on them, etc. And that's turned into an economy, which is also in itself, personally, I find a really like scummy kind of situation to be in, particularly because it's not regulated like gambling is. So children partake in this sort of stuff. So that's where it gets a bit dicey. But this is genius. Like, I don't know. It's just an amazing kind of, and yeah, you're right. The developers of RuneScape would not have foreseen like, oh, hey, so we've made this game, and oh, cool, like the dollars or like the in-game gold's worth stuff to people, so people like buy and trade them and all that sort of stuff. You wouldn't think you'd be propping up a country's economy. With this game that you made.
At no point was that part of the calculus, but you gotta remember that the economy is like, it's all about incentives. Right? Like, so I watched this Vox video that came out recently, which talked about recycling in China, and basically saying that the reason that recycling worked was because of a bunch of niche economic incentives at a particular point in time, at a particular point in the global sort of trade structure, that made it worthwhile monetarily for a small profit. Recyclers in China would take everyone else's plastic garbage and recycle it and make it into something else. Even though, like, this is sort of second, third tier recycling stuff that no one here in the Western world really wants. There's the first tier stuff, which is like obvious, awesome stuff that they can easily recycle. Yeah, all the way down to like fifth tier, it's just landfill crap that nobody wants.
Yeah.
And for decades, basically, China, because of their currency, because of, how cheap it was to ship stuff back to China. So like you'd ship a load of goods from China to the States because they're buying stuff from China, and then the ship has to go back to China to get more stuff. So, but because they're in a trade deficit, a lot of the stuff, there's very little stuff going from the US to China back the other way. So shipping stuff back was like insanely cheap during this period. So like all these economic incentives need to line up perfectly in order for recycling this third and fourth grade plastic in China to make like economic sense, for the amount of money that they make to be more than the cost of doing all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Now those economic incentives don't line up anymore. The manufacturers in China, or the recyclers in China, it doesn't make sense for them economically anymore to recycle that second, third order plastic stuff. And so they're not accepting it anymore. And so now we don't have any of the facilities here to recycle all of that sort of stuff. So it's just going into landfill, stuff that would be previously broken down into pellets, and then those pellets then get melted down and resold and used again in some other thing. That's like painstaking manual work. So no one's doing that anymore because there's no incentive to do any of that sort of stuff. It's like, it's all about the incentives. So if you can get a situation where it's like economically viable for someone to play fucking RuneScape in a way that makes them more money than doing something else does, then they'll sort of gravitate towards that thing. Similarly, if you can make it to where someone can make even just like 1 cent on the dollar doing this recycling stuff and breaking down those second, third order sort of plastics, then they'll do it. But if there's no incentive there, then that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting how these like second, like unintended economies can just like sort of break out. As soon as you talk about anything in real dollars, like anything that actually is like, you can undertake an action that will end up like in dollars being traded back and forth with people.
Yeah.
You can like guarantee that someone's going to try and figure out a way to make, quote unquote, easy money doing that thing and sort of like scamming the system and trying to make money off it. Like as soon as there's money involved, people just go a bit nuts. But like,
and it's the same. It's the mushroom guy thought of like, things only have value because we have attributed value to it.
Yeah. A friend of mine was saying to me recently, he goes, "Oh, housing is a Ponzi scheme. Like these prices keep going up and it's not reflective of anything, and it's not sustainable and all this sort of stuff." I was like, "Yeah, but it's only a Ponzi scheme if you're around when it crumbles. Otherwise." But seriously, like,
Bernie, I get where you're going with that.
Like, if you get in and then get out before the system crumbles, you've just had an asset that's gone up and up and up. If you're there for the end times, well, then you're fucked anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Like, you got stooged. So, yeah, to say it's a Ponzi scheme is probably like, I don't know, maybe technically true to some extent, but like, it only ends up being the case that it was a Ponzi. Like Bernie Madoff would not have been running a Ponzi scheme if he never got caught and he kept making people money. It was only because the economic crisis happened and there was a shortfall of cash and he couldn't keep giving people money and no one was giving him new money to give out that it became a Ponzi scheme. Before that, he was a genius. Like, everyone's like, give Bernie your money, he'll make you 30% on it. And for those people, that's correct. It did. Like, he made a lot of people a lot of money, I guess, over that into the 3 decades that he was in operation. So, economies are weird, man.
Yeah, it's all very complicated, and that's why there are smart people who study it and then can, make decisions based on it and all that sort of stuff. That, people like you or I go, okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Do you ever see yourself, like, if you had the audience, could you ever see yourself being like a professional gamer or something like that? One of those people that does the Twitch streams and gets donations? Because like at the high end, those people with a lot of followers make a shitload of money.
Oh yeah, and I imagine that would mainly be out of sort of endorsements and stuff, right?
I remember Logitech has got an agreement.
Use our headsets or all that sort of stuff.
Logitech has an arrangement with Shroud, I believe, who's a big streamer, and like they've got like Shroud branded like mice and like he sort of spruiks their shit. And I bet he's making an absolute packet off that.
Oh yeah, and there's people like Ninja and all those sorts of guys who make heaps. It's the sort of thing where I was like, if I had the audience and all that sort of stuff. Like, that's the thing. It's like, it's a thing of like, I don't know if I could be bothered putting in like the work to get there because, I guess like any kind of creative arts kind of aspect or like performative sort of thing. It's like, you got to eat shit for a while to get there, sort of thing like that. So that involves a lot of sacrifice and a lot of diligence and all these sorts of things. So I know I'd struggle with that, and I don't know if I'd really like consider it worth it in the long term because it's no guarantee. But at the same time, I think it would also be I'm always really apprehensive with like the things I like to do for fun becoming work because then it's not fun anymore, right? Like, even if you love what you do, you still might not. Like, you love what you do for work. You still wouldn't want to be doing it when you're not at work because you still can't like differentiate those sorts of things, right? So like when I was reviewing games lots, it did get to a point where I was kind of a bit like playing video games isn't fun when you're reviewing them. Like, if you're playing it on your own time as something that you're just liking to do, that's great. But when it was a thing of like, all right, so I have this game and I have to have played as much of it as I can by a certain time so as I can write up a thing, different aspects of it would grind your gears in other ways. And it was and I guess a good reviewer can either like is just conscious of that and ignores it, which I always did my best to do. So I always tried to be like, no, don't be frustrated with this game because I need to play it by a certain time and it's hard. And so that's affecting a deadline because it's me being annoyed by the deadline that's bothering me, not the game being bad. So you got to like think about that sort of stuff. But for example, a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, which I loved, but I loved it because I just played it at my pace and was having fun with it. But if it was
you need to take your time with a game like that.
Yeah. It's a game that wants you to play it at its pace. And if I needed to play it quick or like to just be like, I need to be progressing in this, I need to feel like it's going somewhere rather than like standing back and taking it in and really just sort of enjoying the simulation that it is, I probably would have been like, fucking hell, this is the most clunky, like frustrating, slow piece of junk. I'm so annoyed. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have loved the game as much. So it was kind of turning around like, yeah, just like really affecting my perspective on whether something was fun. And yeah, so I guess I wouldn't want to be doing that in a Twitch kind of sense, right? Like if it's sort of I'm playing this, I guess it's a thing that happens to me a lot. Like when I did that, sorry, I'm rambling heaps, but when I did that charity live stream a couple months, like 6 months ago, fuck, what is time even? Yeah, it was like in June, I think. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and that was a very interesting kind of experience because I'd never really done something quite like that before in a Twitchy sort of sense. But to be playing something where the object of it was to be engaging to people rather than just if I'm just sitting here playing a game, like I'll be sitting here quiet, just listening and playing it and all that sort of stuff. But if it has to be engaging to an audience watching you play it, it feels very different.
It's like you're on, you're doing a show almost. Like
you're doing a show almost, pretty much. Yeah. So I picked my games for that stream very carefully based on that because I wanted it to be like, I think I played a game called Maneater for like half of it, where you play like a shark sort of doing chaotic craziness. So I was like, all right, that'll probably give me shit to talk about. But yeah, like I wouldn't have just picked something like I'm playing Cyberpunk at the moment. I just wouldn't have picked Cyberpunk because while I guess there'd be plenty to talk about because it's a big game and like things to analyze and all that sort of stuff, I'm paying attention to its narrative. I'm just trying to like live in it when playing.
You want to experience it rather than perform it.
Would have been really boring. Or a game like God of War, like playing that with, just with people watching. I mean, I wouldn't want to just be commenting over it because it's a really good narrative. So I don't know. I know that's what some people really love. Like some people would rather watch a narrative game like that with a commentate, like with the commentary of the person who's playing it over the top, and that's great. Not to yuck anyone's yum, but I think like I would struggle playing. Like I wouldn't want to. That's not how I would want to experience that game the first time, right? So yeah, I wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to be partaking in my hobby in that way. I guess. So yeah, that's a really long way to answer your really off the cuff question.
It's no, I think that's all valid. Like I've had similar thoughts where it's like
I just realized that was just a little thing. You were like, oh yeah, we were talking about like just gamers and influencers and stuff before. Would you be into that? And I just unload like it's oh you see, it all comes back to my relationship with my mother and just unload my therapy.
6 hours later.
Yeah.
No, I think that those are all fair points. Like, I think that is for creatives, that is a really weird balance to strike. Is like, with all of these alternative economies that are popping up, like podcasting is a really good example, right? Like exactly what we're doing now is not a thing that could have been done 10 years ago. And yet there are people that make their livings doing it. Now, if you said to me tomorrow, George, you can make $150,000 a year podcasting instead of doing sales, I'd be intrigued by the proposition. Let's put it that way.
Certainly would be too.
But yeah, I definitely take seriously that what you say about something that you do for fun becoming work. Like I believe your brother, who's an author, said something similar to us recently. It was that it's like when it's your job to get up and write, it feels like a job. It's a job like any other job, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like I'm also like I think it's like a uniquely amazing 21st century thing that we can participate in a non-conventional job. Like if you're that person that like absolutely despises having a 9 to 5 and being in a cubicle and like that would be death to you, there are these like alternate things that you can do. And it's like no one ever said to me, no careers counselor ever said to me like, George, you could be a video game streamer or you could be a podcaster or you could be, like this is just not a thing 15 years ago. And so I am excited by that prospect. But yeah, at the same time, I don't see myself plowing, 12 hours a day into becoming the best Overwatch streamer there is. You know what I mean? Like, I also just don't think I have the skill. Like, I'm not a good gamer. Like, I was playing
your niche.
I was playing Diablo 3 with my sister yesterday. She came over and we were like just mucking around, just having a bit of fun. And she's like, "Oh, you're so good at this." I'm like, "I'm really not." Like, you should go online. I absolutely blow balls compared to the people that are online. So like, my natural ability as a gamer is like, I'd say below average, but like versus other people that you'd find online. you know, we've never done
been
well
playing-
in our Battlefield squads, like you and I.
Exactly.
We've
Like,
always eaten asshole. Like we've never done
Exactly.
well against
We've
these people.
been playing first-person shooters for like 20 years.
My entire life.
At least.
And I'm still no good at it.
But then I see how other people play, and it's just like kind of naturally how they sit down to play it. Be like, oh yeah, and I can like 360 no scope and whatever, and like
shoot some prick in the head from
accuracy,
across the map. You see all these
amazing like leaning tricks that are super like fast and bang. I'm like, wow, I am rubbish. I clearly. Is it because I haven't honed on that particular game? Like, it's not like, oh, I bought Battlefield and that's what I'm playing for 3 years. When I do, I play Battlefield occasionally, but I'm getting into Cyberpunk. Hades is really great. Love The Last of Us 2. And I'm just diversifying what I'm playing. So I'm like a master of none.
I think for gamers like you and me, we're casual gamers. We just like playing stuff for the enjoyment of playing stuff. I think for these guys, they really do like pick a game and like, this is going to be my game and I'm going to spend 15 hours a day 7 days a week playing this one fucking game. And so
like the pros and stuff.
Like they will get good at PUBG or at Overwatch or whatever, but that's like the only game that they've been playing since it came out 5 years ago or whatever. Like, so of course they're going to be good at it, but at the same time, I still don't think even with that like Tiger Woods level fucking focus and training, I don't think I'd be one of those people. Like, I just don't have whatever that gene is that makes you amazing at online gaming. Like I've never had it.
Yeah. So no, it's pretty wild. But also I can't imagine it being fun at that point. When you've drilled it to that point.
You have to be getting some sort of enjoyment out of it. Otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it. But like you'd listen to these guys that are esports guys and they think of it like training. I'm going to get up, I'm going to get up early. I'm going to, do my exercise. I'm going to do 16 hours of Overwatch and then I'm going to like have a healthy meal. Like they treat themselves like athletes because I mean, the amount of money that's at stake, esports is now like a multi-billion-dollar industry of like people going in and playing video games competitively against one another in stadiums. Created this whole like sub economy, which is like the gaming industry is bigger than movies now, like bigger than movies and something else combined.
They like music, like all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So there's Anyway, we got distracted talking about 21st century economies, but I think it's all very cool and interesting and weird.
Super interesting.
What's it going to be like in 50 years and 100 years?
Jesus, I don't know. Actually, that was the thing. I thought about that the other day yesterday, playing Cyberpunk because it's set in the year 2077.
Yeah.
And I was like...
And everyone's doing body modifications and all that sort of stuff.
There's all that sort of stuff. And it's a problematic universe for a lot of reasons that, I won't get into it now. But when I was thinking about it, though, I was like, 2077, I would be 88. No. Yeah, 88.
But you'd still look like the, handsome, young, scruffy man that you look like now, just with lots of bionic arms and shit.
That too, but it's just more of that, just that thought that hit me because I was like, oh, my grandparents, like, before they died, they lived into their 90s. So it's like, wait, this is a game where they've picked like that year that's like ages into the future, like feeling that kind of thing of like, oh, this is further than any of us could live. I'm like, no, I could. The year this game is set in, this future Blade Runner-y game is set in a year that I could feasibly live to.
Yeah,
which is a crazy idea. Especially with advancements in medicine, who knows? Maybe we'll live forever.
I'm gonna fucking upload my brain into a computer, bro. Watch me.
There's a bit of that in Cyberpunk.
I wanna see how it ends. The human race. I mean,
the human race. Fire. I imagine.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, fire and rising sea levels.
Yep.
On that note,
sun might explode.
On that note, we have been, we are, we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at George Sipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And make sure you follow him. We didn't even talk about how Adam wasn't on the show this week, but you can follow Adam on Instagram at AC Doreen. He's busy. It's no big deal.
People would have just noticed.
That's fine. And thank you for joining us on our weird, rambly video game, new economies, strange episode. Tangent. Why not? We can be doing this for 10 years. Either you're in or you're out at this point.
Yeah. You can have your money back if you don't like what we do. We can do what the fuck we want.
Jog on. Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.